Almost. Major. Holy fucking shit, this is major! Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Almost Major, where we talk about the many major studios and the films they released. Today we are on our, I don't know the episode number and I'm quitting counting, of our 1980s New Line miniseries. My name is Kevin Tudor. I'm here with Bryden Nash. Bryden Nash? I am tired. Wow. Bryden Doyle.
Hello.
Kevin you put us in the telepods and the fly, and now we're just stuck in one body.
We're going in the land down under, and when we do that, we switch our names around. That's what happens.
Yeah,
that's true. Bryden Nash is just somebody who it's a Boston accent, but you say A at the end of it. That's right. That's my joke. And Charlie Nash.
Hello.
Charlie Noyce. And today we were talking about Heatwave from 1982. This released in March 8th, 1982 in Australia. Screened at Cannes in May 1982 and released on June 10th, 1983 in the US. And I don't know how much it made in the US or how much theaters it went to. Do you know?
I know the budget. It was like $1 million, I think is what Noyce said in one of these interviews that I was reading. But he said
yes.
like it didn't. The word on this is it did not do very well in Australia, and like actually like sent him into like making TV films and TV miniseries for like the next few years until he did Dead Calm and Blind Fury. That was kind of like his big comeback to the big time, and going into Hollywood especially.
That was like 10 years later, right? Like
Dead Calm is 1989 and Blind Fury is 1989. He says like he made like Dead Calm. He had like just finished editing it in Australia, went over to America to make Blind Fury, then went back to Australia to like, you know, fiddle with Dead Calm and like, you know, post-production and whatnot. And then like both movies came out like that same year, I think is what happened.
God damn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did find it was on Wikipedia with no source, so grain of salt, but it made $267,000 in Australia, which, I mean, yeah, that's not that good, but couldn't confirm that. But yeah, I found he said like around $1 million, so yeah, which it's not that bad, you know. You didn't get that much money, but for $1 million, that's not the worst looking picture. But I also don't know the conversion between Australia and U.S. money. But
I don't understand numbers.
I don't. Yeah. Top 5 films that weekend is Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, Octopussy, Trading Places, Psycho 2, and War Games. You got 3 sequels there. What is this? It's fucking 2023? What's going on here? Psycho 2, which the sequel, directed by Anthony Perkins, who directed Lucky Stiff, which we'll be covering next week. Who did Psycho 2?
It's Richard Franklin, I think, who did that movie Road Games, which I've heard is really good.
Yeah, I have heard that's really good.
Psycho 2 is good. Psycho 2 is good.
I've
never seen Psycho 2. Yeah. Return of the Jedi is one of those movies that's like, it's a 5-star movie in my heart, and I know it's not perfect, but you can't tell me that movie isn't special to me. It's just so good.
You need to watch War Games. Matthew
I haven't
Broderick
seen War
Games.
I saw it
so long ago. Yeah. I probably did not understand any of the politics that was going on about, like, you know, nuclear war when I was
War.
like,
Boo!
9.
Games! Yay!
Oh my God, Kevin, I was in a grocery store the other day and I heard some ad that was like, the pandemic is over. Yay! But COVID is here to stay. Boo! And it was like, I don't know, that's a little tone deaf. I think
that's
still
good. But we're here to stay. That's bad.
But it's like, we're already to that type of like thing where I was just like, guys, like
COVID killed millions, boo, but it didn't kill my desire to travel across the country. Yay!
Yeah, like also that's like, you know, the grocery store is a place where people have to go. You know, like it doesn't matter what, like,
remember several years where if this much people were in this convenience store, we'd all be maybe get COVID and die? That doesn't happen anymore. Kind of.
Yeah, people are still dying. I mean, like, Jesus. Now it's a topic that I don't even want to get onto, but
you excuse me, I'm trying to talk about Flashdance. Number 1 song in the US this week is Flashdance, ... What a Feeling by Irene Cara. Number 1 song in Canada this week is Flashdance, ... What a Feeling by Irene Cara. It was number 1 in the US for like 8 weeks. just a song from a movie could just be number one for like 8 weeks in the 80s. They were just like, I love this movie
still,
so
right?
much.
I can imagine. I mean, how long was... I can imagine My Heart Will Go On was, like, that big back in 97.
Well, yeah.
I still hear that. I still hear that in, like, pharmacies and, like, sushi restaurants or whatever.
I'd always want to fall in love at a pharmacy and a sushi restaurant. Both places are just like, have you called my doctor yet? You're supposed to call my doctor.
Yeah. So what are you in line for? I need a medication that doesn't give me hives.
All right. Well. But yeah, Flashdance, bad movie, but that song's kind of cool, I guess. But yeah, I mean, as far as like people being like, I love the movie so much, I gotta get the soundtrack for the movie to remind me about the movie, and then I'll go watch the movie in theaters again, and then, because I think at this point, Flashdance was number 6 this weekend.
This was also around, I mean, this wasn't too far off from Purple Rain about to come out, where that was the number 1 movie, song, and album all at the same time.
Goddamn right.
Yeah.
Now I need to see how much Flashdance made, because I'm probably going to be like, really? It was a budget of $7 million, made $201 million.
Yeah, why was it a big deal then, I guess? I mean...
What if a woman could dance and weld at the same time? Wait, she didn't do it at the same time? This movie sucks. Let's see. Plot description from Google. The architect of a proposed residential complex forges an unlikely alliance with the leader of the project's opponents. Cool. Based on a screenplay by Mark Stiles and Tim Gooding, and the screenplay was eventually written by Mark Rosenberg and Philip Noyce, directed by Philip Noyce. Prior to this, Newsfront in 1978, which was nominated for 14 Australian Film Institute Awards and won 2 of them. 14! Because I'm sure they were just like, we got one Australian movie, let's just give them all the nominations.
Yeah.
An important bit of context. That's a funny joke, but this is like around the time when like a lot of like the Australian new wave Noyce talked about this. A lot of those big directors like Fred Schapisi, Peter Weir, George Miller, Julian Armstrong are all like coming up and like eventually like breaking out, and like many of them going to Hollywood to make like other movies, which is really cool to think about. Them like having those small beginnings and then breaking out. Yeah, and it's funny also how like some of those directors are like still kicking around, like George Miller now, but like some of them are just like I don't know, they're kind of quiet. Like Peter Weir has not made a movie in forever, and Noyce is kind of a departure now, but we'll talk about that. Yeah,
Julian Armstrong we will talk about because Judy Davis is in My Brilliant Career in 1979. But after this, Dead Calm and Blind Fury in 1989, Patriots Games in 1992, Clear and Present Danger in 1994, Bone Collector in 1999. Hell yeah, that movie fucking sucks. Rabbit Proof Fence and The Quiet American in 2002. He loves doubling up on years, Jesus.
Yeah.
He's like the Australian Soderbergh. Salt in 2010, The Giver in 2014. Charlie, you told me to watch this, but I just didn't get around to it.
I said no such thing.
The Desperate Hour in 2021, the movie where Naomi Watts tries to stop a school shooting. And just this past week, he came out with Fast Charlie with, what's his name?
Chris Brosnan.
Yeah.
It's also, I think, the last movie with James Caan is what I heard too.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, he has 3 movies in pre-production right now. The Noise Don't Stop. That's right.
Somehow I have seen none of his movies except for 2 in the past 10, 2 of his more recent efforts, Salt and The Giver, and I can't tell you anything that happens in either of them. Like, just The Giver, I remember looked like shit. Salt, I remember the advertising campaign because it was Who is Salt? And it was just a close-up of Angelina Jolie's face. It's like...
just shrouded in darkness.
Like, shrouded in darkness. I saw that stoned at a drive-in. Can't tell you what happens in it. The Giver, I don't know why I saw that.
I know for a fact it's somewhere on my Facebook page. I gave The Giver 3 stars out of 4 at the time. It's probably not a 3-star movie.
That's why we got to get rid of Facebook. Shouldn't be allowed to look at that. The only one I saw before this was The Bone Collector, which, like I said, it fucking sucks. I did watch Sliver, and I've not saying I bought the Blu-ray while we've been talking on Amazon for like $10, but you know what? I need to have it.
Sorry.
I need to have it.
That's too aggressive a tone, but
I need to have it. It's, you know what?
For a second, I thought you were going to say that's too aggressive to buy that movie on Amazon, Braden.
No, my tone was too aggressive is what I meant.
I've run out of good movies to buy. I'm sorry. Starring Judy Davis as Kate Dean. Prior to this, My Brilliant Career in 1979. After this, A Passage to India in 1984, which she was nominated for a leading Oscar. Barton Fink and Naked Lunch in 1991, along with 4 other movies. This was like her big breakout
Love
year.
Judy Davis. Nobody else is in this movie, though, right? It was just Judy Davis.
There's like 3 other people, but I couldn't even be like prior and after this because it's like all Australian movies that are I've never heard of.
Well, one
Besides,
of the
like,
guys,
Bill Hunter.
One of the guys is I just saw him in that Russell Mulcahy movie Razorback about the killer boar. I think he's
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's
I didn't know this existed.
Chris Haywood, who plays Houseman, the guy who like ends up like fleeing the country at the end of the movie. He plays like one of like the creepy Australian guys who's like harassing like the female lead at the start of that movie, and then like ends up getting his comeuppance at the hands of the boar at the end of the movie. Razorback, gorgeous looking movie. It is goofy, but it's quite good. Yeah,
I need to watch it. Apparently, there's a movie this year also about like a very aggressive fucking camel. I'm just like, that can't be scary. I bet
Ishtar?
it is.
Did they remake Ishtar into a horror movie?
I think they did.
Have you ever seen Ishtar, where the gag where it's so funny? There's like Isabella Johnny gives it's either Warren Beatty or Dustin Hoffman, I don't remember which, like tell this person that you need a blind camel is like a code for like getting in on a secret, but they just sell him a blind camel and the camel just ends up like running into all of the background extras while they're talking. It's just the funniest shit. Or I was like, people hated this back then? This is amazing. Like
I do need to see that movie. You shared in one of our group chats recently the clip, I think, from Animaniacs, where it's like, this dinosaur's chasing us, we need to drop a bomb on him, and they just drop like copies of Ishtar and Heaven's Gate on it.
Which are really funny, especially considering it was the 90s, and a part of me is like, okay, that's funny, but
it's a good bit of like just fun wordplay, I like that. Yeah.
It's also cultural humor in terms of like how those movies were valued back then,
Yeah.
Also jokes not for the people that are not for the children that are watching the show whatsoever, just for like the adults that come in and like, yeah, that's kind of funny.
I found prints. No,
Yeah.
fingerprints.
I don't think I'm gonna
I
do
don't
that.
think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. I was looking it up because Mary Beth recently watched this. It's called Naga, Naga. It's a Saudi Arabian movie, but yes, it is about a vicious killer camel. It's on Netflix.
I want to see that.
One of the top reviews said, really thought this was going to be this girl fighting a vicious killer camel for 2 hours, and that's not what I got. So I'm a little disappointed, but this is still a good use of my time. Fighting off a camel, it's just, I don't know, maybe not as vicious as we want.
Can I say one other thing that will actually be kind of interesting as like a connection to other New Line stuff with Philip Noyce is he talked about like how Dead Calm was like kind of like a movie that got like some attention, but he also said, this is from a film comment interview with Jim Emerson from back in the 90s around the time of Patriot Games coming out. He said that Noyce thinks it was his TV pilot for Wes Craven's Nightmare Cafe horror fantasy series that landed him the Patriot Games gig. And because he says, I assume that since the Nightmare Cafe pilot is the last thing Brandon Tartikoff, who was the NBC president from 1981 to 1991, assume that was the last thing he looked at NBC, and Patriot Games is the first thing he put into production at Paramount, there had to be some connection. So it's just kind of cool how we kind of like, I mean, I feel like there have been a couple of other movies where like we've talked about, it's like, oh, there's a connection to the Nightmare series with like New Line and everything. So I just thought that was kind of cool to bring up.
Patriot Games is Jack Ryan too, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I somehow have the one father in America who never watched those movies or introduced me to them, but I feel like they are total dad movies, right? Like,
yeah, and my dad watched, even though he said like as it went on, like he didn't really like it, he kept watching the Jack Ryan Amazon show that John Krasinski was in. Like I say, like, oh, is it good? And he's like, but like he'd like keep watching it anyway on his iPad because there was just like, I don't know, it's just something to pass the time, I guess.
yeah.
Yeah, I forgot all about Nightmare Cafe, but it also has Robert Englund for all 6 episodes of it.
It was only 6 episodes? Jeez.
Yeah.
Wow.
I have to track this down. See if.
Wait, question: was it a miniseries or was it like a like meant to be a big multi-season thing?
I'm sure it meant to be a. Oh, it stopped filming due to the writer's strike, and it never got back into production.
Oh, okay.
So.
Well, that's like a valid reason.
The other trivia about the show is that a poster for this series appears in a scene on the wall in Seinfeld season 4, episode 4, The Ticket. Cool. Love to only be known for being like, hey, yeah. Who else do we got here? Oh, we still got the rest of Judy Davis. let's see. Husbands and Wives, 1992, nominated for supporting Oscar. Marie Antoinette in 2006, and The Dressmaker in 2015. We also got Richard Moore as Stephen West, Chris Haywood, as you were saying, Bryden, and Bill Hunter. Trivia. This movie was inspired by the real-life disappearance of Junita Nelson and her campaign against high-rise developments in King's Cross, Sydney. And the film was originally titled King's Cross, where it was originally a screenplay by the aforementioned Mark Stiles and Tim Gooding. Speaking about this film, 25 years later, Noyce stated, quote, I'd have no doubt shot it differently, told the story differently today. Maybe that's because I'm more conservative. I might have made the connections between the conspirators more certain rather than implied. Heatwaves belongs to a different era of Australian cinema, a time where we took a lot of risks. I guess that comes with youth, the youth of the director and the youth of that second new wave of filmmakers. It was a time when there was a love affair between audiences and Australian cinema, something which these days is rather on and off.
Yeah, and the real case never got solved. Like the people who were who were charged with like a conspiracy to kidnap, they did serve time in prison, but like they've all passed away, and like none of them like gave any answers, including the last person who like saw Juanita Nielsen before she died or before she disappeared. I think like in '83 they like assumed that she was dead, but like in 2021. There was an article from the Mirror that said like that there was the New South Wales police offered an enormous reward of $1 million Australian dollars for information that would help solve the mystery of what happened to her, because her family like is still like there are still members of her family that like want to know what happened, which is really sad. Yeah.
Do you have any more trivia that you were finding with Noyce interviews or anything?
I mean, it was nice to hear him like talk about like other Australian filmmakers. He said like talking about like Australian cinema, which. Listen, I've seen like a lot of movies by I've seen a handful of movies by Australian filmmakers, but I feel like that era of movies when they're making movies in their home country, that's like something I'm a little spottier on. I want to catch up with it someday. But he talked about Newsfront, which, like you said, was like his big breakout. It was coming to terms. Noyce said it was coming to terms with the Australian experience, what it meant to live in Australia, which was so much a concern of the early new wave of Australian films. Having been denied an opportunity to examine our past on screen, we spent almost 10 years doing that before we made any significant contemporary films, if you noticed. Now all the films coming out of there are contemporary. He says he was brought up on Westerns and English historical movies and being fed other people's history. That's like what motivated them to like, dig into their own history of their country. And then he says now Jane Campion, who did Sweetie and Angel at My Table at the time, and Jocelyn Moorhead, who did Proof, they're making almost exclusively contemporary films. They're probably also able to do that because us guys have shifted aside and allowed them the opportunity to spend what little funds are available there, which I think is interesting that he makes a point about them making contemporary movies, because I know Campion and Moorhouse would alternate in making historical and contemporary movies. Jane Campion did like The Portrait of a Lady and Bright Star and Power of the Dog, and Moorhouse did, I think, Dressmaker is like a Western or something, like, or set like many years ago.
Even The Piano, which Jane Campion...
That comes out the year after he does this interview with Film Comment. So yeah, it's interesting that they alternate between that. It's also funny to just like, I was thinking about like what big Australian directors are around now, like that are kind of like seen as big representatives of their country. And I don't know if there are other answers you were thinking. I mean, like I said, some of the directors who are part of this new wave are still around, like, George Miller, and like some of them are still alive, like Peter Weir, but they just don't make movies anymore. Like, I guess like Justin Kurzel, who did like Macbeth and Knit Ram and Assassin's Creed, he's one, I guess. John Hillcoat, although he does.
Did he do the Snowtown Murders?
Yes,
I remember
that was his first movie, I think.
Good.
And his brother's a composer.
That movie's pretty fucked up.
Yeah, I've heard his movies are. I mean, I want to say some of his movies, but they all sound just really unpleasant. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely not. Yeah, the Snowtown Murders is definitely. I was like, oh, I'm glad I saw that. We'll never watch that again, probably. Yeah. I mean, that's what I feel bad about is all the Australian movies I've been thinking of like Greg McLean, who did Wolf Creek, and then there was what was the one, The Hounds of Love or something that came out like
what's that guy's name?
Years ago.
Ben Young, I think, is who did that. He's remaking. I saw the Curtis Hanson movie, The Bedroom Window, which is interesting. Which is one of Hanson's lesser movies, so it is, but it's like kind of a good premise. So it's ideal for a remake. Whether or not he's the guy to do it, we'll see. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Greg McLean. I mean, you do get like a lot of horror movies coming out of Australia now, like Lee Winnell and James Wan, of course.
The Loved Ones.
Talk to Me was like a big breakout this year.
Ones?
Sorry, I'm talking over you, Charlie. What'd you say?
No, I'm talking over you. No, I forgot Talk to Me was Australian, although I didn't care for that one. But
Royal Hotel.
was The Loved Ones Australia? Royal Hotel. Well, that was Kitty Green's a Canadian.
Yeah,
No,
but it's
she's
in
Australian,
Australia.
isn't she?
Oh, is she? Oh, I thought it was. No, wait. Fuck. Maybe just getting it confused because
She's from
Billy
Melbourne.
Carter's
She's Australian, yeah.
Oh shit!
Yeah.
I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
It's fine. I mean, she's made movies set in America. Like, you know, Assistant, of course, is like very. I mean, it was funny, the prop that was going around today about like movies that you think about, like best movies about America that are not directed by Americans. That is a movie. I don't know if I'd say that's one of my favorites. I like that movie, but that is a notable example. It's a very New York movie set directed by an Australian. Yeah.
I just think I've watched a lot of contemporary Aussie horror, if that's what the term is. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the terms that like is talked about, like, I think around the time that like these this Australian New Wave is talking about, is like exploitation, like, you know, horror movies like set in Australia and everything. I mean, I don't know if I don't know if I'm like correct in saying that this would fit into it, but Razorback has basically just been like, this is man, Australia looks really bad in this movie. Like, everyone looks like feral, and the board is like tearing this town apart. But yeah.
Does The Loved Ones hold up? I remember liking that one.
I haven't seen it since it came out.
I didn't love it when I watched it, but you know, I might have just not been in the mood.
It goes to some pretty wild places, I remember.
Mm-hmm.
Hasn't the director of that like not done anything since or something like that?
He
did one movie called The Devil's Candy.
That's
that
the
I never
one.
saw.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I've always wanted to rewatch The Loved Ones because I really liked it in like 2011 when I watched it. But yeah.
Same. I haven't seen it since I was in college, and remember being like, "Wow, this thing is more hardcore than I thought it would be," based on, you know, the poster and the ads and whatnot. Even though she's got a fucking power drill in it, but yeah.
I will also mention one director who kind of we're talking about like a lot of Australian directors who make very intense or very bleak movies. One person who kind of like counterbalances that by making very upbeat and very outwardly entertaining movies is Baz Luhrmann, who makes like movies that are very much not in that that are very stylized and very like in your face with like the very peppy energy.
Yeah,
that's a good thing
I'll watch
necessarily.
Wolf Creek. But yeah, it's very, very much. I mean, you got like the Gillian Armstrongs, but most of them are like really gritty, and it's just like, what do you expect from motherfuckers that wake up and like kangaroos are like fist fighting in the streets when they're trying to go to work? I mean,
they live in the future.
When it's the hottest summer on record, emotions can run high. From the director of internationally acclaimed Newsfront, an explosive new motion picture. Award-winning Judy Davis is the rebellious Kate Dean. Richard Moyer is ambitious architect Steve West. Eden, a $200 million dream turned nightmare. In a city whose ruthless forces deal brutally with those who challenge it.
This is the same woman that's trying to destroy you and the project and everything we work for.
But being caught in bed with a bomb-throwing terrorist does not do good, our son.
Philip, I want her out.
And I am not going to give up. And I'm not afraid.
Every city has its dreamers. Every city has its victims. This city had a heat wave.
Initial thoughts, Bryden. Initial thoughts on Heatwave.
I thought this was okay. You know, Noyce, I feel like has like I feel like going into this, I knew his rep was kind of like, you know, a journeyman, especially like with this Hollywood stuff, you know, like movies that are like, you know, competently directed, like Patriot Games, but like maybe don't stick out necessarily. Although I was reading that film comment interview, it was interesting, like his where he was trying to give like more of a political read on it and like talk about how it compared to some of his other political movies and like trying to meld those political interests with entertaining, like, you know, accessible entertainment values. I think what I was surprised by was this movie. I think the script and the performances are kind of uneven, but the direction is the thing that like really kept me on my toes throughout the whole thing. Is I found like I really liked the score and sound design. I felt like there's always like kind of just like whether it's like kind of like the faint sort of ominous like din of like the score where it's like sort of like the guitars and they're sort of like lightly riffing and also like kind of the high pitched like keyboards like, and there's often like sort of like that music playing throughout the movie like just very faintly or like sometimes very overtly, but there's also like often like people like chattering in the background and sometimes it'll be like really overwhelming. Then there are other scenes where like the camera is like doing like really active things that like make ordinary actions look really creepy. There's a scene in the strip club where like you've got like all this red lighting and it looks kind of garish already and everything, but then like you get the dancer's POV and the camera just keeps spinning and spinning and spinning, and every time you cut back to that POV, it gets faster and faster and faster until like everyone's like laughing faces look like really maniacal and ghoulish. So I really like that how he's able to like find like pick these like relatively ordinary scenes and find like ways to make them like really unnerving, because there is just kind of like, I mean, the movie opens with like, you know, scenes of like people like acting out violently with like, you know, the guys with the sledgehammers who are like, you know, breaking into people's homes to kick them out. So the movie's like, that violence is already baked into the film like from the beginning, but there is like just this like ominous like sense of threat that like pervades the whole movie, especially like with like the heat where everyone looks like super sweaty and like is really stressed out. Noyce, I think, is like really good at like, you know, suggesting dread without necessarily moving into violence, like the suggesting of violence without actually showing it. The scene where the reporter Mary like initially goes missing, where like you're just like in her house and everything, like you're like looking at newspaper clippings, and it seems like an innocuous scene at first and everything, but then you hear Judy Davis calling her name repeatedly, and you start to hear like the sound of like buzzing flies, and you start seeing smoke in like in the room when like, you know, when she goes into the kitchen, when Judy Davis goes into the kitchen, like the oven is on. And you don't see anything violent, but you just get the sense like something really bad happened here, and the fact that you don't know it is like keeps you on edge. And it reminded me a lot of the scene in Dead Calm, which I would recommend to anyone who's listening to it, even though it does have some really upsetting sexual violence in the movie. It is an excellently directed thriller. There's a scene in that movie where Sam Neill goes aboard a boat that has been abandoned, where the crew has died. And he like, you know, the boat is like flooded and like the power's not working, so it's all shadowy and it's on like a tilted angle. And there's like this video that's like, it was like a pleasure cruise and everything, and you hear like the sound of like the video where like, you know, people are like laughing, like, you know, sort of like having fun on the tape at first and everything. But then as like the tape keeps playing in the background, you start to hear the audio just get more and more distressed as like you get this implication of something really horrible happened on this boat before we arrived on it in the film, and you see like just like blood like smeared on like the TV and everything, and like without, and that movie does get more explicit with the violent images it shows, especially what happened on that boat later on and everything. But just like he's really good at like, you know, that level of suggestion to create a sense of unease. That being said, it does like, his direction does make up for the movie, I think, not being especially engaging on a character level. I feel like the movie is like very didactic, not only politically, which is not a problem, but didactic in a character level, and I feel like that's like doing the work. That's like covering up for how thinly written the characters are. I mean, the relationship where like, you know, Judy Davis and Richard Moyer are like, you know, diametrically opposed politically, but they end up getting together. I feel like that only is like the movie really only, the movie's way of trying to convince you of that is just by having them say it in the dialogue, where like Judy Davis practically says something like, "We're not so different, you and I." That was my Australian accent. And it's really not convincing. And I think Davis is like quite good in the movie. There's a scene where she says she says like when she's talking about how like they won't let the developers go, she's like, "Because we won't let you, mate." And the way she like, you know, throws that word back at Richard Moyer, like, and like so smirkily and like, you know, with like such with such defiance, it's like really good. Like I like her character in that moment, from that moment. And Moyer, meanwhile, plays every scene just kind of like blankly staring into space. And like, I get his character's like a passive wimp. He doesn't do anything in the movie. It's just like, I don't think his arc is very is conveyed by the writing or by his performance in an interesting way. Yeah, you don't really get to know these characters as people, which I feel like, and look, like, it's the kind of thing where like, if you know just the basic situation of like these people live in their houses and they're being kicked out of it, that's like on that level alone, like you're sympathetic to the tenants, of course, but like you don't really get to know them as people. You don't get to know the person who goes missing and who Judy Davis is searching for. Mary Ward, I believe, is her name. So it does like leave the movie feeling kind of hollow. But I will say, just atmosphere-wise, I think Noyce does like a really good job to convey tension throughout. I found like the climax, even though like I was a little bit confused about like how everyone related to each other, and I will say the movie sometimes is like kind of lit kind of darkly and doesn't quite convey everything clearly in terms of like who's in business with who and whatnot. I mean, I guess the whole movie is like, and the reveal is like, everyone's kind of in bed with each other, in terms of doing all these conspiracies and stuff. It's conveyed a little bit confusingly, but like the direction where like you're running through like the big crowd and like the camera's like, sort of trying to keep up with them. And then the ending scene where like it's like creeping along like the muddy ground, it almost looks kind of like the Evil Dead. Yeah, no, I think there's like enough striking filmmaking going on here to paper over a lot of the issues I have. I was pleasantly surprised to see how like it made me appreciate Noyce more as a director, but the storytelling leaves something to be desired for me. I feel like I talked a lot about that. Sorry if it was a little confusing. But I want to pass the baton over to you.
It was more thorough than it was not confusing at all. If anything, watching the movie was confusing.
I was about to say, thank God Bryden filibustered so that this episode wouldn't be 5 minutes long. Because I'm going to be like, I don't know. Charlie, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Bryden, in that his direction's interesting. In terms of the politics, yeah, like, I'm very much, like, obviously, you're not supposed to be on the side of the protagonist who's, like, it's basically just like, yeah, what's wrong with gentrification? Like, whatever. It's just kind of like, well, I don't want to be spending time with you. And, and I'm not saying you can't make a movie about that, but you're right. The characters are so thinly sketched, and they're like, so what made you want to get into this? And he's like, I like architecture.
I went to America, and then I abandoned my
went to America. Yeah, and it's just like, okay. Yeah, and like you said, like, we don't get to know anybody who's squatting in their house or even why they're having to squat in their house, really. We don't really know what brought them to that position, and that's totally fine to launch us into this movie like that, but, like, good God, apart from Judy Davis, who's an amazing actor, nobody has any personality. I get that it's doing the whole film noir structure of there's been a murder, there's a conspiracy, everyone's dirty, double-crossing, all that stuff. It doesn't matter if you can follow the plot as long as the atmosphere's there, and Philip Noyce does a lot with slow motion and, using, like, he keeps using that strategy of, like, using, like, Shutterstock or whatever it is. Isn't that it? Like, where I was like, okay, once it's fine, but this is, like, a trick that's getting really old really quickly, even during the stuff, like, that by the end where you get to, like, I kept thinking a blowout at the end where I was like, is this just going to be one big tragedy with this big, celebration? And, like, by the time that all of the, that filmmaking is happening, again, film noir, it doesn't really matter about the plot as long as you're, like, engaged with the aesthetics. And the aesthetics aren't bad here, but, like, I was just so, like, completely unengaged from everything going on here, just based on the fact that, yeah, like you said, Bryden, apart from Judy Davis, the performances are boring. It's just not that interesting for me to watch this character who's like, I don't see what the big deal is about, we want to help these people and make this new entertainment fucking center for men. It's just like, I don't know. Like am I supposed to, like, of course I'm going to be on, of course I'm going to be, like, on Judy Davis and the squatter side, and then, like, okay, we're stuck with him just being naive about how all of this works, and, there are double crosses and whatnot, and you can't follow any of them anyway, and, the stuff with, finding out whatever happened to the missing woman, it didn't even feel focused in, like, okay, what is this movie really about? Like, in terms of, like, those heavy-handed politics, but then you have all the stuff about, okay, this is based on a real-life case of this missing woman. It's not really about, it's simultaneously about her, but it's also about the politics of, everything going on in terms of the housing crisis going on here. And nobody, by the time he and Judy Davis are getting together, it's not believable, and it's not even steamy or hot or anything like that, because I just don't believe that she would want to be involved with him at all, especially considering how boring his character is written and played. And by the end, I was like, I don't care who's doing what to who. I was just, I will admit I'm on a new sleep schedule. I'm pretty tired. I was tired watching this. I'm not a Philip Noyce person by any means, so I didn't have a lot going into that I was even really looking forward to, but I was expecting something that at least, grit me through this, and I just found it to be kind of a slog. Like, it's not even terribly made. It's totally fine, but, like, I can't recommend this to anybody. Like, it just seems
it's also, like, a tough movie to recommend in terms of accessibility. Like, we had to watch this on, like, links on, like, sites where movies just like are
Archive.org, yeah.
uploaded by people who are interested in this kind of shit. It's not like a movie you can rent. I couldn't even rent it on like YouTube or whatever. Like it's
no, it's just. I mean, I'd say if you're curious about Philip Noyce, sure. I am not one of those people, and I just didn't.
If you're curious about Noise, start with Sliver. If you're still interested, 20 movies in, then you can watch Heatwave. Because you still got to go through The Desperate Hour. You still got to go through The Giver.
The one thing that I did think that captured a tone of melancholy and uncertainty and hopelessness was the score. I thought the ambient score was actually pretty haunting at times and was the only thing that kept me trying to snap back into what was going on. But yeah, like I just found it, and again, I'm in a weird like mindset and mode. We're also recording around the holidays. A lot of stuff's going on, so I was just kind of like, yeah, okay, gotta watch this for the pod. And it just, I just had a hard time. Like, it's not even like anything terrible or egregious or anything like that. It was just hard for me to engage with this in any kind of level. Just not the type of movie that I was like in the mood for at this current time, nor like was just, I don't know. It just, maybe it's because a lot of stuff going on politically right now. It's just like, I don't know, you're stuck with this protagonist who has to kick these people out. I'm like, let them fucking squat. I don't care. Like, I know that's not the movie's fault. You can make a movie about this stuff, but again, like, just very limited psychology or insight into not just the characters, but any type of like sociological like commentary as opposed to what's going on. I don't know.
Yeah.
I found it very bland and very, again, the movie's only 85 minutes. It's not like this movie's interminable, but at the same time it's like there could have been a little more to engage you in some ways other than just. Also, just have to mention that every other dude in this movie looks the same and sounds the same and are like completely like, oh, have we seen that character before? I think you mentioned this too, Brad and Kevin. Like, is that someone we saw before? Do I care? Like, they're all kind of, film noir stock characters anyway of delivering exposition in some cases of like, this person was seen at this time and then this person, when this house burned out, it's just kind of like, all right. So it's all plot based, but then the plot gets so convoluted and then you don't care and whatever. I don't know. Just a big shrug from me. I feel like that's not exactly great criticism or insight on my part, but I was just not feeling this thing at all. So
listen, it's fair. We are human. It's happened to me before where like I try to like, put myself in the position where it's like maybe this isn't what I'm in the mood for, but I gotta watch this thing. It really
is that thing too. If I don't know what I was in the mood for, but it wasn't this. So it's just that.
Yeah, I would not. I mean, I like this movie fine, but it's not like this is a movie that I would say, you know what, Christmas movie you should watch? Heatwave. Christmas doesn't really factor into it that much. No. Also, bad vibes. It's just like not a fun movie to watch at Christmas.
No, it's Which I'm all for a bad Christmas vibe movie. I mean, I fucking love Elf for Christ's sakes, but
yeah, and I just watched The Box recently. Ooh, what a
I forgot that was a Christmas movie.
Yeah,
but that movie's silly. That movie has Frank Langella saying, "I'm with those who control the lightning" and shit. Like, that's not this thing.
I really fucking liked that movie. Although I was laughing to myself, imagining like Katniss saying, like, Frank Langella and James Marsden, it's like, they're the man in the box. Sorry.
Also, Cameron Diaz, like, I think she opens my friend Keith Ulick and I talk about this, how she, like, opens the door to Frank Langella for, like, the second or third time, and it's a close-up of her face going, like, who are you? Or something. It's just so silly.
It also has... Funnily enough, I didn't know he was in it, but John Magaro, who I know is in that movie Past Lives.
He's great.
Yeah, he's
Past Lives,
like the long.
Cow.
He's basically playing like the 70s equivalent of like the kid in Donnie Darko's like, what if you put in pictures of dead people and demons, crap like that. Like it's just like a long-haired teen who's like just an asshole to everyone in the movie. So I thought that was funny. But anyways, sorry, I'm talking about The Box.
No. I mean, Batman Returns is also a movie I watch every Christmas, and is, extravagantly, demented as that movie is. That's a bummer of a movie that I watch every Christmas because, look, sometimes the best Christmas movies are sad, but this is just like we'll use Christmas as a window dressing prop for everyone should be together with their families, and now these squatters are getting kicked out of their homes. And who's committing domestic terrorism? I don't know. I hope it's the squatters. They fucking deserve to pull that shit. Like,
I will say,
that's just my take.
with the Christmas setting, I said it doesn't use it that well, or not that significantly. I will say it's creepy. What talk about the sound design in the movie, how like when the climax of the movie takes place on New Year's Eve, and you do hear like sort of like all the fireworks, and like you also hear people like in the crowd screaming in the distance, and it does like add like, even though it is in the context of like a party, it does like at that point in the movie where people are turning up dead, it is like creepy. You're thinking like, well, is that part of like the party, or is like someone like in danger or anything? Like, is something eerie happening on? That's what I felt, but I thought I'd mention that.
It's also a movie that like it's not that violent until like the last 20 minutes, where it gets pretty grisly and graphic, and by that point I was just, well, I guess a lot of Aftermath is grisly and graphic, but the movie had so lost me even by that point, where I was just like, oh, nasty. I do not care. Like, I was like, at one point I was just like, I don't know who that is, and it doesn't really. Like, where's the weight in any of this? I felt the weight of, like, I don't want these people to be homeless, and then everything else that happened after that was like, eh.
Kevin, what are your thoughts on the movie?
Yeah, I have no thoughts. Did y'all know that they made a Monk movie?
I think I did hear about that recently. Who made that? Like Paramount Plus or something?
Let's see. That's USA. Who owns USA? Yeah, I think it is Paramount Plus. Yeah, I don't know. Probably a lot of, like, mask jokes in that, because he's a germaphobe. Must be
Peacock.
hilarious.
Peacock did it. There we go.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Just no thoughts, none.
No, really, I don't. It's the only note I took was, this guy looks like Sting or Flea. I think more like Sting, and that's all I put.
Yeah. I forgot he had a wife. When the wife came back an hour later, I was like, oh, right.
I thought
that was an
like
affair.
A shock. Yeah.
Well, and she like hands up. She says like, I mean, she's there and like sitting in the dark or whatever. Then it cuts to him like reading a letter where she says, "I'm divorcing you," and like,
yeah.
I'm like thinking,
I'm not part of your passion. Yeah, I'm not part of your passion. I'm like, he said he likes architecture, but he just seems annoyed and gruntled throughout this thing that he's just like, I can't build this house.
Oh,
These people won't leave.
This guy seems like a cool hang, honestly.
And also, like, the thing that he's mad about is that, like, not that, like, they're building the thing, but, like, that they're not building it in the way that he wants to build it. Like, that's the thing that upsets him. And it's just like, dude, like...
Isn't it... And then there was that, what is it, an entertainment center for men? And I'm just like, I just imagine that, like, there are dumbbells on the walls, and, people just eat red meat uncooked, and, I don't know... Like, there are tires everywhere. I don't know.
It's a boxing ring with 3 kangaroos at all times.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I was just going to say there's that one line where they're just like, how about we design it this way? And he was like, that's awful. If you design it like this, all the pipes will freeze in the winter. This is a disgrace. And I was just like, man, I think this is a big deal, but I can't tell. I don't know.
Well, it's all because of their characters who are just exposition lines. They don't really matter.
Yeah.
And they're hiding their motives and everything, because, like, the one guy who owns the company, it turns out that, like, he had, like, a past with, like, gambling, and he sold off, like, property to, like, some fake company that doesn't exist. And,
it's a real snooze fest, if you ask me, because...
I didn't find it was a snooze, but, like, it is... I agree with you that, like, asking you to care about this guy's perspective and making him such a thin character, it's like such a huge ask to ask him to sympathize with that guy who's kicking people out of their homes. And it's also like even more annoying that like he's not interesting as a character. They don't make that hard perspective interesting.
I mean, at least Judy Davis, it would be like, I completely believe that your entire character would be about saving these people and making sure they don't go homeless. That makes sense to me. This fucking rich, privileged guy, just having
My
no
wife
interior
doesn't
life
love architecture
whatsoever.
as much as me.
And the movie trying to like bring the similarities between them is like where people are mad at Judy Davis because one of the people who won't like back down from like being kicked out of his house, he ends up getting killed in a house fire. Someone like torches his house, and the daughter of him gets mad at Judy Davis, blaming him for killing her dad because I guess like it was like her, political activism that like
yeah, but she's not a character either.
No. And what I was gonna say too is that like people are also mad at Richard Moore because he's like doing the project that is kicking people out of their homes. People are right to be mad at him and everything. It's like they talk about like they both feel like they're being blamed, and then he says something like, "Well, I guess they're both a little bit right." I'm like, no, it's your fault. You're building this project that's kicking people out of their homes. It's your fault. Davis wants to live here. Like, it's
imagine a film noir where it's from like a film noir with the Mr. Potter character from It's a Wonderful Life. Like
Hell
you
yeah.
know, like,
Well, no, the better version of this movie is just dirty work. It's just yeah.
Now if you put Norm Macdonald in this movie and had them scaring all the people out of tearing these homes down, that would be amazing.
Yeah. If Shooter
Smells like
McGavin
fish.
was trying to if Shooter McGavin was trying to tear down a high rise so that he could put up a parking lot for an opera house or whatever it is, yeah, it'd be a lot better. But not everybody can be dirty work, unfortunately.
Or if this guy just went total transformation into domestic terrorist, that would have been interesting to me.
Which,
like,
interesting we keep mentioning that, because I know that movie that Noyce directed years later, Catch a Fire, which I believe is set in like apartheid era, like South Africa, is about a guy who like gets like sort of into like domestic terrorism, where he's like blowing up like oil plants or something. I might be wrong. I need to see that movie. But,
that movie barely existed when it came out. I remember, like, that movie made no impact whatsoever.
I've heard mixed things, but still, it does feel like somewhat daring for a major movie, because that movie was focus features and anything, like taking a perspective where it's like actually like having you sympathize with domestic terrorists and everything. I still feel like that is like a daring perspective for a movie to take even nowadays, like, and like having you sympathize. Now it's like yeah, in apartheid South Africa, it sounds like yeah, it's easy to sympathize with the guys in that scenario.
Were people God, this makes it sound like I'm being such a snob with like, but was that like was that more apparent in Australia for them to just be like, we empathize with the movie? I know the movie's not doing that, but it's just such a big ask, and like, here's your central focus, cool. Like, no complexity, no nothing. Just ugh.
Yeah, I don't know, and
also might just be the mood that I'm in right now. It's just not anything that I was particularly wanting to even think about right now.
What if Philip Noyce directed Dirty Work, and what if Bob Saget directed Heatwave? That's what I've been wondering. Plot. Let's get into the plot.
So Richard Moyer is like the sort of lead architect on this project, where they're going to be like building sort of like new slicker high rises in King's Cross, I think is like the neighborhood in Australia where the movie's set. And the tenants are fighting back by like squatting in their homes and like refusing to leave. The movie opens where a group of guys like heavies are just like recruited, I guess, to break down the place with sledgehammers and like bust in, and it doesn't go very well. Then Richard Moyer starts like showing up at meetings where Judy Davis is sort of like one of the leading activists trying to like fight for people to stay in their homes. There's like talk of like maybe they'll like compromise so that like, you know, Richard Moyer's side could get stuff done and Judy Davis's side could get stuff done. Like stuff starts coming about the project that's like not great and everything, where one of the guys who like owns the company, who I believe is played by Chris Haywood, Houseman I think is his name, he like it turns out that like he's like paying people to like vote for things that will help his a large part of Moyer's arc in the movie is realizing the people he works for are, surprise surprise, corrupt. He finds out that like his buddy, you know, came from nothing, and like, you know, I mean, it's like it's made a point that Moyer's character like went to study in America, and maybe that's why maybe took some of their values up of like sort of the idea of like pull yourself up by your bootstraps and like being a self-made man and like, you know, making money on your own. That's sort of how he views his buddy Houseman, his sort of origin story, but it turns out he's doing shady stuff like, you know, buying up church properties and selling them to a company that has no record of existing. There's also this other businessman who, just judging by his accent, it sounds like he's from South Africa. It's possible that he's just like, you know, got maybe a different Australian dialect, but he's like talking about like how he wants to like get into business with Moyer by helping him set up some entertainment clubs in Australia. And one of the dancers who works for this businessman, she is the daughter of one of the tenants who refuses to leave his house because he's very prideful about owning his own place. Taylor is that character's last name. I don't remember his first name, but he ends up dying when a bunch of the houses are burned up in an act of arson. He dies. The daughter of that guy, of Taylor, she's one of the dancers at the club, and also one of the key figures in this movie, plot wise is a reporter who is writing a lot of the articles that are kind of slamming the architects and like people who are behind this housing project that is like pushing people out of their homes. Her name is Mary, I believe. She goes missing early on in the movie and is never seen again. It's implied that like, you know, something really bad to happen to her, but like Davis wants to find out what did happen. As she and Moyer inexplicably grow closer, I guess because of like, you know, she's already disillusioned with how the system works and he becomes disillusioned with how the system that he's part of works. They end up sleeping together. It's a thing that you see coming like a mile away because they keep having like these sort of like smirking looks at each other and like, you know, reverse shot between them but it's like it's just one of those things where it's like, oh gosh, this isn't
for a movie
work.
called Also, for a movie called Heatwave, you'd at least expect the heat of the movie to actually like provide some sort of tension or like, I don't know. Like, I'm not saying the movie needs to be body heat or anything like that, but it's just like they make such a big point about how, you know, the weather is supposed to, you know, be allegorical to everything heating up in the plot. And it's just like the sex scene is just like so...
It's like an afterthought.
Yeah, no, it really is like, well, I guess we have to do this. The one thing, other thing that I will say, I mean, Judi Davis, obviously the best performance in the movie, but like the camera loves her and she is striking in this movie. You know, so you'd think that like they'd at least make her character like, you know, not just, you know, strong in terms of like, you know, her political beliefs and morale, but like also someone who's, you know, confident in them and you know, in themselves physically and sexually, and the movie doesn't take that into consideration at all either. It just seems like a pure contrivance on her part, and also sells her character short of just like, why are you with this fucking guy? Yeah. I don't know.
And why is he with her? Like, it doesn't make sense for either of them. The movie, also speaking of contrivances, there's a point where when she invites him back to her place, she says like, forgot to lock this door or whatever. I'm like, that's gonna factor in later, and it does because someone breaks into her house because through an open door. Sorry, that is like actually like an upsetting scene of violence that happens there. So like it is like, but it is like the kind of movie where it's like you can see some of these like things coming a mile away, and it doesn't make it more convincing. It's just like one of those, like, you know, with the romance where it's like, you know, that's gonna happen even though like it doesn't seem believable.
You'd also think that based on what she's involved in, she would lock her fucking door. like you know, like, I mean, she's involved in like people losing their houses and she keeps forgetting to lock her door. Like,
I mean, I yes, and to be clear, I am sympathetic to her character no matter what and everything. Because, you know,
I'm sympathetic to her character either. I just think that's bad writing on like, why would this person who is so involved in making sure people don't get kicked out of their houses keep forgetting to lock her fucking door?
Yeah, maybe she's like,
it doesn't
distracted.
make any sense.
I mean, she does like have like a lot of scenes where she does
she's
look
distracted
kind of
a lot because
Yeah.
it happens, as you said, more than once. Like,
the other thing too that yes, and she's also getting threats throughout the movie. Like I think because like there's the scene where she gets a delivery at her house with the flowers, and she has that kind of weird tension, that sort of weird vibe with the scene where the guy's being kind of flirty with her, and she seems kind of into it and everything. But then she opens it, she looks upset by it, like, you know, covering her mouth and everything. It's like funeral flowers. It looks like, right? Like it has her name on the flowers. It like says like, you know, Kate whatever, like RMN or something like that. And I was thinking like, is it like a funeral arrangement as like saying like, you're gonna fucking die if you keep talking about this? Like, that's how I read it in the scene, but like maybe I misunderstood.
I mean, every moment of this movie, and especially in terms of plot, feels like, I like that they're not spoon feeding us anything, but it also feels like they forgot to explain A, why this would happen, and B, why a character would make a decision this dumb that would allow something like this to happen, considering it doesn't correlate with anything they're involved in terms of what they do and what they politically stand for, and in terms of just making common sense of like, if I'm involved in this social movement and also getting death threats, I will leave my house door unlocked all the time. Like come on, guys. I don't know. Yeah.
And the movie is like, it makes some like pretty interesting, I mean, direction wise, it makes some interesting choices. I like that, like early on you get that shot of kind of like the 360 move around the camera of the cramped space where all the squatters are, and they're like passing around tea and snacks and like, you know, having like a real sense of community with each other. And you get that same shot of it's Richard Boyer's Family Christmas, where everyone's like passing around gifts and giving smooches, and it lands on him and he just looks absolutely miserable. Just sort of like the contrast. I like sort of that camera move, like repeating itself to show like, oh, there is like a real sense of love in like this community of squatters and everything. And then like there's just not, it seems like really phony with like this upper crust society that Richard Moyer is a part of. But the movie, but that's also like the 5th or 6th scene where it's like Moyer like being in like a really fancy room and like hearing about like the stuff that's going on with the squad to be like, anyway, off to this party I go or whatever.
It just feels like the same tricks being used over and over again, even the same camera movements as you said. I mean,
I'll try to get through the plot in like the next couple of minutes. After Davis and Moyer sleep together, the police show up and they claim to have found bombing devices in Davis's drawer. They think that like it seems like they're trying to pin the arson on her. You don't believe it's not supposed to be her that did it.
No, you don't. Yeah, and then, they also have their hands on her immediately, even though she's only, from what we've seen, open the front door. like she doesn't seem like she's like, get the fuck out of my house. She's just like, why are you here? And then all of a sudden it's just them leading her into the living room, and they've got both cops have an arm around her wrists or arm, and I'm just like, not unbelievable, especially knowing what we know about the police, but like just immediately like, this is already just, it felt weirdly blocked and staged to me, where I was just like, because then she kind of slips her arms out of it, and I'm like, what?
Well, because she's like telling, like, she says, like, I know my rights, like, you can't do this to me, and like she's saying that to Moyer as well, because he seems really confused.
But it's all awkward. It's all awkward and stilted at the same time, where I'm like, what is this going for? Again, for a movie called Heatwave, it's like nothing dramatically heats up until the last 15 minutes.
And it's like also like the same group of cops who I feel like you keep seeing throughout the movie. Like they're the cops who are like not really doing anything when like they're getting information about the disappearance of the journalist.
Well, there's only 2 or 3 cops in the whole continent of Australia. We all know that.
They put all the money into this development project. They only could pay these 3 cops. And
just imagining Chief Wiggum just being like, look, we are very, very busy right now. Just king me to like a bear or something.
It's like the cops in Relentless, where it's like saying, hey, this guy's trying to kill me. It's like, well, if he does something again, we'll do something.
This is like, I know we're only like 8 movies into our New Line cinema, but these already have the worst cops we've ever covered, right? Like
in the 80s, they couldn't give a fuck less.
And after, so Moyer, nothing really happens to him in prison because he has connections and everything, but his it's the lawyer Philip, I believe is his name. He tells him like, hey, you're gonna want to maybe sever your connections with like Davis, because it's gonna be bad like PR for our whole like housing thing, especially because like, you know, money is like kind of precarious right now with like all the delays that are happening, because like there's all these like construction bans that are happening and everything, where like there's all these problems with the unions, so that like they can't actually start construction, but money is like, you know, just like leaking from the project like the whole time. And then he goes home to his wife, who knows that he was like fucking around with Davis, and eventually she leaves him.
Then a lot of shit happens in the last 10 minutes that I couldn't even fucking keep track of. That I was just like,
the big things to remember are when Moyer goes to talk to the dancer at the club, she refuses to give information, and the bouncers beat the shit out of Moyer outside the club.
Beat the fuck out of him for no reason.
Yeah, in a way where I'm just like, Jesus, what happened off camera that we didn't see?
She literally said, get him out of here, and they were just like, oh, hell yeah.
But then means. it's like, they didn't just throw him out. They like had a fucking field day with him.
I think it's because he's asking questions and like, they don't want answers. They don't want to have the answers dug up.
But the movie's not even clear about that. Like, it just kind of cuts from A to B, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Davis ends up sneaking into like the company where the project is being built, and she like breaks into Houseman's office and searches for files, and he comes in from like what looks like a tennis game or whatever, and he's like been seen arguing with this lawyer throughout the whole movie, so like he's clearly up to something. He like slaps her, and she slaps him back, and then like she's thrown out. And then, like, 2 scenes later, when Moyer goes to the office, it's like the receptionists are, like, packing up stuff, and they're saying, like, yeah, Houseman's gone. Like, he's just, like, the company's no more, and I also can't tell you anything. And then, like, there is, like, actually, like, a really good scene where, like, Houseman is, like, packing up his entire house, and, like, his daughter's, like, doing a dance and everything, but then, like, someone, like, knocks somebody over in the background, and, like, everyone screams, and, like, his guards, like, break out guns, like, they're thinking that something bad is gonna happen. And then, like, he flees the country. The lawyer, Philip, ends up, like, brutally murdered, like, off screen. Like, he ends up, like, they go to his house, and, like, there's, like, a scene where like he just ends up like dead or whatever, because like he's into some shady stuff.
Yeah, splattered with blood. I couldn't even tell what they did to him, except there was blood everywhere, all over his body, all over the floor.
Yeah, and like it's like written in blood, I think, on the wall, like arsehole.
Which didn't she write at one point in the beginning? Didn't Judy Davis write arsehole on the window with something?
There is like some. Fuck, I should have taken the note about a graffiti.
So is that supposed to be like a red herring for it might be her or something? But then they drop that.
They don't really put any emphasis on when she does it, like on the window when they're at the architectures.
I mean, there's no emphasis on anything in this movie.
Well,
that's kind of the thing.
Yeah, and then like she gets a call from the reporter who's been interacting with Moyer throughout the whole movie. They think that they found Mary in the water, and then they turn her over, and they say it's not Mary. And then like the reporter like says like, "Oh, I bet you feel a little bit of relief now, right?" And then she goes nuts and slaps him, and like gets really upset at him and Moyer, saying, "You don't actually care about her and everything. You just care about money." And then she runs off. When she goes back to her house, like she's been trying to rally the community to still keep up morale, but I guess just after all this like horrible stuff that's happened, a lot of people are just kind of resigned to it. Like, look, I'm just gonna move somewhere else. It's gonna be easier. It's okay. And like there are some people who like just refuse to talk to her. Eventually, when she goes back to her house, like near the end of the movie, there's like a shot, and something bad's gonna happen because she tries to turn on the lights and the power's not working. And then like there's a shot where she's like in the kitchen fiddling with the door, and you see a figure in the background. He approaches and like attacks her, and like there's a struggle where she's being really roughed up. And then he says like and like he threatens like to hurt her again if she like keeps asking questions, and you only really see like part of his face when like he lights up a cigarette like while he's doing. He has like a big mustache, and then she gets her gun and she almost shoots Richard Moyer when he shows up, but then like she just goes out into the street, and there is a really I would say a genuinely tense scene where like the camera's like racing behind them to keep up with them as like Moyer is chasing Davis through like this really crowded streets as people are celebrating New Year's Eve, and there's fires going off and people are screeching, and like people's faces are like getting really close to the camera, and like they're laughing, so like they look really maniacal. And they end up at this club where you see the name of like the fake company that you've been hearing talk about in relation to Houseman, and the person at the head of the table is the entertainment businessman who owns like the strip club, who's like linked up with the Taylor girl. Davis, she sees the guy who like roughed her up, and she approaches with a gun, and then but instead in the foreground, the person who steps forward is the Taylor girl, who is like the dancer, and she shoots the entertainment businessman. He falls dead into the cake, spurting blood, which I think is a very striking image, and then she gets shot by the bodyguard who was roughing up Judy Davis, and everyone like just like looks at the dead body, and Davis like turns back like covered in blood, and then just sort of like stumbles out in a daze. Moyer is just like sort of standing there, also dazed, which is how he looks for much of the movie.
He's just a witness. He's literally just our cipher for the rest of the movie, which I'm not saying you can't do that. Plenty of great movies have done that, but it's like he's barely involved in anything that's just happening at this point for like what feels like such a...
Well, the point that you made about how it's difficult to tell some of these characters apart, I was really confused in this club scene, because at one point when like Moyer's like sort of scanning the club for a familiar face, Davis's specifically, he turns and locks eyes with this mustachioed man who looks a lot like the reporter who he's been talking to, who's been giving him intel on like his friend's schemes, but he's talking to the cops who seems to be kind of who you've been seeing throughout the movie, who also seem very corrupt. And the guy like just says like, "Well, how's it going?" Like, to Richard Moyer. And it's like such a quick, darkly lit shot that I was like thinking, I felt bad. I couldn't tell if it was like it was the same character we've been seeing, and it just turns out like he's also corrupt. He's not actually like a good reporter like we thought, or if it was just some guy who happened to look very similar. The movie doesn't convey it clearly enough.
I don't think you should feel bad, because I was also confused, and ultimately I think that just has to do with bad cinematic storytelling and emphasizing who's important and why and what. And again, noir films, this is kind of turning into a noir film, especially at the end. But like, if you can't I didn't feel anything watching this. I didn't feel any of the ethical or sociological or moral weight of any of this at the end. It's just sort of, oh, okay, this is how it plays out, and I don't know. I feel like you at least get a sense of like sadness and melancholy, and just the you get the sense that everything is corrupt, but I don't really get any sense of pathos from any of the filmmaking on display here. Because, and again, like you mentioned, there's some camera tricks here, but he's used the same camera tricks, the same, like, it kind of felt like, you know, 2 or 3 special grab bag tricks that he was just using again. And by the time you've seen enough of these people, like enough dead bodies with this amount of blood and these types of Shutterstock slowing down moments, it's like, I don't know. I don't think Noyce, I am no Noyce expert, but it just didn't feel like he's enough of a stylist to pull this off in a way that felt impactful to me.
I will agree with you, though. I'm glad you highlighted the score. I do like the sort of very sparse, sort of like, or not sparse, but like sort of the very atonal, like sort of echoey guitar riff that plays over the last scene and continues into the end credits, as it reveals that, like, when you go sort of as a camera like zooms along, like whooshes along like the sort of muddy construction ground that's just like now been condemned or whatever, and like bubbling up to the grate is what looks like the dead body of the journalist and everything. It is like I said, it mood wise it's very eerie, but like again, like, because like the characters, I mean, look, I don't want to sound like, oh, I don't care about this dead person or anything, but the movie, I would say with like a lot of the characters that you're seeing in the closing scenes, it doesn't really have a lot of weight, because like again, like they're not.
She's just a symbol.
Yeah.
No, they don't feel like people at all.
Mm-hmm.
No, I completely agree with you.
It's sad because of like the circumstances. You wish you knew the character.
Yeah. Even in noir films where a certain person goes missing, they will at least, even the characters interacting with one another when that character's off screen, will give you a certain sense of who this person was. Or usually it's men talking about a specific woman in a lot of cases, where by the end they don't really know who this poor soul was that was kind of eaten alive by a system of some kind, and you get that sense of like no one cared and no one even truly understood who she was. This movie is supposed to be like, this person was a fucking saint, political hero, and like you don't even get the sense that the movie really cares about her so much as what she represented, as opposed to her being a human being or her sense of humanity in any way.
Yeah, and again, that if the movie had a little bit more on its mind, maybe that could be, because I feel like that's interesting. That's like an interesting idea, but like, you know, do you care about this person as a person, or what it means for like a political cause and everything? Like or even getting at the emptiness of the way that men possess women and objectify women. There's not even any of that. It's just sort of like in the middle of everything, you know. People always talking about like how you know, a lot of Judy Davis being like, you don't even care about her, and I'm like, well, the movie doesn't care about making her like a human being at all. At least, you know, in most good noirs, even if you understand that all of these things that people have been saying about this person have been misconceptions, it can at least go to the emptiness of how people view certain people as objects or a gain for political or financial means for their own greed, and then you're kind of left with the emptiness of this lost life. No, you get none of that here. You get none of like even what she meant for these people, other than people being like, she was so great, you know. Like, it's just you can't really just expect people saying those words over and over again to do the work for you, you know, especially if it's based on a true person. You'd expect them to put a little more work in. I don't know. I also, all your points are great. I also completely forgot until now what the name of the project is. Eden. Boy, they keep making a point of that.
Boy, do they, yeah. I mean, I rolled my eyes every single time they said that. Like, Eden, Jesus Christ. Like, there was a point where I was thinking about the Lars von Trier movie Antichrist, and how Charlotte Gainsbourg keeps talking about how she's terrified of Eden, but Eden's supposed to be like the woods or something, and I'm just like just imagining like this fucking building that they're like, I don't want them to build that in Australia. Like, I don't know, my brain's so broken.
There's also that movie Eden, which is all about like house music, right? Imagine if it was like, I'm scared of Eden.
Yeah,
it's just like Daft Punk.
That's a Mia Hansen love joint.
I need to see it. It sounds good. Yeah,
it's good. Yeah, I mean that it's so heavy-handed to even just call it that, and like him just. It's almost a parody at one point where like the wife's reading off like the letter, as you mentioned, Bryden, and then being like, I'm not part of your passion, and it's him just looking at all these outlines he's drawn of this fucking building.
It's over
like,
the table.
Who the fuck cares? And it's just like, and those drawings look like shit. Like, it doesn't even look like a place you'd want to go to. It's like, like, and it's a lot of people just talking about, no, this will be important and stuff like that. But the other thing is, like, film noir, there's usually a sense of, like, even amidst, like, big cities and skyscrapers and all that, there's a sense of setting here, which for a movie called Heatwave, where it is supposed to be this hot, sweaty, time and set in Christmas and all that stuff, usually it's just like you get a sense of like a certain setting either suffocating people or swallowing them alive in some case. And for a film about architecture, you don't really get any sense of like what, like I don't know, maybe did either of you feel like you got a good sense of setting or what this place is like or anything like that? A city of lost souls, or people floundering to stay alive. I didn't feel like this thing had any sense of even conveying within a visual sense, even through blocking or background or extras or anything like that, that like it just seemed very matter of fact, like they will just be in this room or they will just be on this street. And it's just kind of like, I don't know, no real sense of like where how they are a product of their environment and how their environment shapes them in any way, and why this is so vital for people to believe that this new project will make this certain environment thrive, or whether or just how detrimental it will be to the people who will suffer as a result of it. It's basically just you don't want them to go homeless. It's like, no, absolutely not. But we also don't know anything about the film. I don't think does a good job of laying out any sort of mise en scène, if I'm going to get extremely pretentious here. So
No, that's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah, just by the way, I am sitting in a bathtub with flippers on. And a yellow rain jacket.
Yeah. The one detail I will say about the Heat that is sticking out to me is like, even in the scenes where people are like wearing ties and like, looking very professional and everything, they're still got like sweat stains underneath like their armpits and everything. And that's just like the kind of thing where like I'd be like so stressed out. Like I'd be like, oh fuck, I look like an idiot.
Yeah. Oh God. I know.
I want to see Noyce's other movies, especially like his political movies, like Catch a Fire, Newsfront, as we've talked about. They sound like interesting. Maybe they do a better job of like having you care about the characters as well as like outlining the political points that they're fighting for.
I'm not in a rush.
I'm
Dead
watching.
Calm, I think you would like. That is just like a straight up thriller. I think
Dead Calm, even the trashy ones like Sliver and Bone Collector, which I meant to catch up with for research, but we're recording this in December and there's a lot going on right now, so I just let this kind of slip, and that's on me. I don't know. Like I was hoping, because Salt and The Giver are 2010's picks, where I'm just like, well, he probably lost it. Maybe this will give me a better sense of who he is. And like, I mean, it's definitely a different type of filmmaking, and I'm not saying it's not a subject that I find to be uninteresting in any way. I just found every way this film goes about handling it and exploring it to be incredibly by the numbers, kind of stale, whatever, kind of
totally
rudimentary filmmaking. Yeah. Kevin?
No. I will be watching The Desperate Hour as soon as we get off this call, though. I gotta do it.
Let me know how that is. That'll be our intermission. If we did like a Patreon, it's like talk about the movies of like directors we've covered. It'd be like Desperate Hour. What do we think, folks? Bad. All right, thanks for listening to Almost Major Patreon.
Yeah.
Thanks for subscribing to our $25, yeah, get this. Yeah.
Only 30 seconds, but ooh, those seconds are worth it.
Oh shit, I watched Run, Hide, Fight, or whatever that movie's called. I thought that's what y'all were covering. No, I'm
fuck.
sorry.
I heard that was bad.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Almost Major. Please rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes. Please follow the pod on Twitter @AlmostMajor to keep up to date with what movies we will be covering in the future. Myself, I can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at KevBonesy. Bryden can be found on Twitter at Bryden Doyle and on Letterboxd at JDoyle. Charlie can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at CTNash91. Once again, thank you for listening.